Yeah. Okay. All right. A few ideas. So on Parshas Nasso. So when if we begin not right at the beginning, but there's two short parshas. Parshas Nasso is split into five sections. You've got the continuation of Bamidbar, which is an interesting question in and of itself, why it's split. The Avodas and the Levium. You've got the remaining Gershon and Merari, the remaining the roles and responsibilities that they have. And then you've got two very, very short parshas. One is the question of someone who steals and swears falsely, and what happens and how they have to pay, etc., which is a very brief parsha. That's the beginning of, that's Perek Hey Posuk Hey. Sorry, there's one just before that. Sorry, the beginning of Perek Hey is the instructions for sending out of the Machane those who are at various stages of Tumah. Then that's also a very brief parsha. Then you have the very brief parsha of someone who steals and is nishbal sheker and swears falsely, and what they have to do in order to repay it. And then you have Sota, and then the Nozeh, and then you have basically Birkas Kohanim, and then the Korbanos of the Nesiim. So although it is somewhat difficult to find a theme, there is of course a theme, a consistent theme, and the main focus of the shir is really to develop this idea of what it means to strive for spirituality. Yeah, Birkas Kohanim, exactly. Yeah, that's right. That's between the Nozir and the Nesiim. Yeah. Yeah, it's all there. So the main focus, Rashi says, if you look at Rashi says on Perek Hey Posuk Vov, that what is this repeated? We know this parsha of having to pay back if you steal and swear falsely is already said in Rashi says in Parshas Vayikra. It says there, what you need to do if you steal and you swear and you've got to pay back. So Rashi says, it says Rashi Hevov, yeah, it's repeated here because of two chidushim, two extra things. Number one, that you shall confess. You're not obligated to pay the extra fifth and the osham al pi edim through the witnesses unless he's moida, right? Unless he admits, you have to admit it. Yisvadu, you have to be moida. There is a confession. But Hasheni, in the second aspect is shapirish al gezel hager shunitzan lakonim. The second aspect, which is new here and is not in Vayikra, is the fact that gezel hager, if you steal from a ger, it goes to the kohanim. That's the Posuk Ches. Right? If the person has no goyel, he has no person to redeem him, which means that the tovea, the person who is claiming the money, who made him make the oath that he didn't steal, which was false, right? Has no goyel. What does it mean, goyel? We know this from Megillah Shus, which is very significant to come back to, right? Yeah, right. They has no redeemer, right? That word is used again and again in the Megillah, or at least in the parsha there that's talking about, right? Exactly. Well, he's the goyel, he's the redeemer, Ploni Almoni, and then Boaz becomes the redeemer for Machlon and Kilion, okay, and he ends up marrying Rus. How is it possible? How is it possible? Say Chazal, as Rashi brings on that Posuk Lov, how is it possible someone who doesn't have a goyel, he doesn't have any redeemer, has no relatives, son or daughter, brother, etc., says Rashi, this is a ger, someone who is a ger, who converts to Judaism, ve'ein lo yorshim. If he dies and he has no inheritors, then what do you do with the money that is owed to him for the theft? Right? It goes to the kohen. There's a beautiful Orach Chaim. No, a Sforno. Sorry, beautiful Sforno. Very brief. It's there on Perek Hey Posuk Vov. Says the Sforno, Kvar bo HaKabbalah, we know from our received tradition, otherwise Teresh Al Peh, Shezenema Al Gezer Hager Bisman Avayis. That this Posuk, and the main focus of this parsha is Gezer Hager Bisman Avayis, right? Gezer Hager Bisman Avayis. The fact that it has to be given to the kohen, right? This is the main focus of the of what it's talking about, right? Ki omnom, because however it says hagozel osoi, someone who steals from him, mechalal shem elikov, he is mechalel the Shem Hashem be'enei hager, in the eyes of the ger, asher bo lachsos tachas kanofov, who has come to shelter under the wings of the divine presence. V'lochein, and therefore yikore moel b'kodesh, and therefore he is called someone who trespasses the kodesh, the holy things. V'chayav osham kamishpat kol moel boy, and he is chayav an osham, a sin offering, like the rule is with anyone who is moel b'Hashem, who trespasses and commits this crime against Hashem. So what the Sfona is telling us here is a very brief but very significant. Why is it that Gezel Hager is limoil mal b'Hashem? Why is it a me'ila against Hashem especially? The answer is because he is stealing from the very person who has thought that this is a place of safety and security and trust, right? He's come to rest into the wind of the divine presence. All of a sudden, he finds that someone is stealing from him, right? So that's why it's such a bad thing. If someone has an aspiration, if someone is in a position where they expect you to look after them, they have trust in you, then clearly the breach of that trust is correspondingly greater. And that's why it's especially bad with the ger, because he's put that trust in us, right? Very significant as Safona. The next idea I wanted to share with you. For a second, that's not this one. Okay, we can do it. We can do it in a second. Okay, it's a very brief idea from the Mikdash Mordechai, a sefer called the Mikdash Mordechai. He says that one of the astonishing things, again coming back to the sequence of the psukim in the parsha, is he says one of the astonishing things, echad advorim hatzmuim b'parsha, is the fact that shebe'emtza pirat tafkidei hashvatim v'siyas ha'aron v'achar karbonos hanasiyim nimsor parsha sota. Why is sota here between the responsibilities and the roles of the shvatim? Because that really is the link, if you think about it. You know, the end of the parsha, the Chanukas and Nasim, the Chanukas Abayis, and all the Karbonos and Nasim is a direct continuation of the beginning. This is their roles and responsibilities, and this is what the Nasim, this is what the Levim have to bring, and this is all about the Mishkan, and the Nasim brought all these Karbonos, right? So why is it that you have in the middle the parsha of the Sota? And he says the answer is because Sefer Bamidbar is focused on Lemishpachosam Levesavosam. That's what it is. Begins with that. Right, Parshas Bamidbar begins with the counting. Last week's parsha, Lemishpachosam Levesavosam, counting according to the numbers of the households. So he says like this: Dor Yotzei Mitzrayim, in Bamidbar, which is known as Chomesh HaPekudim, obviously the book of Numbers. This is the generation of Yotzei Mitzrayim. Mudgash Inyan Klal Yisrael, Sheyasodahu Mishpacha Yisraelis. The ikka and the main point about Klal Yisrael, the foundation, is the Jewish family, is the Mishpacha. That's the Mishpachosim Avos Avosam. And he says in the Sifri, it says V'yosem Lecha Shalom. Also in this week's parasha, what is the Yosem Lecha Shalom? We'll give you peace. Hainu Shlom HaMishpacha. Fascinating. So Sifri says that's the Shalom in the Birkas Kohanim. There should be peace in families. And we know sometimes what a challenge that can be. It's always very easy to be at peace with someone who's far away from you. The hardest is to be at peace with those who are closest to you. This is the Teva HaChaim. This is the nature of life. V'zehu shesama HaTorah degesh v'parsha Sota shupoel yotzei mechilul kedushas HaMishpacha. And that's why the Torah puts here the emphasis on the parsha of the Sota, because it's the opposite of the chilul of the kedusha of the mishpacha, right? It's the opposite of the defamation, the profaning the mishpacha is the concept of the Sota. It's the direct opposite of that. It's a direct opposite of that. So in other words, what I think he's doing is understanding that we have the responsibilities in terms of the spirituality, the levels which the people are meant to attain, the Leviim and the Kohanim, they have the highest levels, they have to carry the Oron, they have to carry the Mishkan, right? We have the Korbanos of the Nasiim, which is also a lofty and incredible aspiration. People who give beyond what they, strictly speaking, may need to do, but they have great responsibilities, and therefore they have to give, and they give more, and they give all these wonderful things and gifts and everything else. Comes along in the middle of the Parsha of Sota. to understand, to bring us back down to the basic reality of all of this. And all of this, and the kedusha of all of this, is founded on the concept of lemishpachos and lebeis avosa, the concept of shalom in the mishpacha, the concept of kedusha in the mishpacha. And if you forget that, it doesn't matter how high you're soaring in the Elomus or Elyonim, the upper worlds, and you're busy, focusing on the Mishkan and spirituality, you'll be brought straight back down to earth because it's all going to collapse. And that is what is going on with the Sota he says in the middle. That's the Yosem L'chol Shalom. It's the Shalom and the Mishpach. So that's why that's here in the middle. Now, a few ideas on the Nozir. So just as a general observation or a general point, because the Nozir is a fascinating subject. The whole idea of the fact that there is a responsibility that people have in life, and that's through the mitzvahs and how we're meant to live. And then you have an entire parsha that somebody wants to do more. It's optional, and he wants to do more. And there's a whole discussion as to why and how, and why he's in a position that he wants to do more. Some understand, for example, and we know the famous Chazal that says, if a person sees a sota bekilkula, yazeh atzmo min hayayin. If he's seen that, therefore he has to put himself into a position of being a nozir. Why? Well, one of the reasons one of the reasons the Mefarshim give is because it's a bit like the wife of Lot, who turns around and she becomes a pillar of salt. There are things he shouldn't be looking at. Why does he see the sota? He shouldn't be looking at the sota. It's a sign that he needs to perhaps elevate his levels of kedusha in some way, right? So that's why he should go off and become a nozir. One of my favorite lines and jokes is that they say that there was once a speaker who came to the yeshiva, I don't know which yeshiva it was, and said decided you're going to give a whole shtickle Torah, is going to have a whole chabura on proving that women can be nazira. He gives a whole Torah, a whole thing backward and forward, clear the whole thing, and then at the end, Rosh Yeshiva says, same pasuk, Abel ben Yisrael, Isha Yisha. So we think often of the Nazirim as men. It says in the Torah, Isha Yisha, a man or a woman. Yeah, we've got to go back to basics. But the Al-Sheikh says, Al-Sheikh HaKodesh says like this. He picks up on a number of different aspects at the beginning of the parsha. Why does it say the words Va'omarta Aleihem, you shall say to them, which seems to be extra superfluous, right? This is in Perek Vov, beginning of Perek Vov. And this phrase, Ki Yafli Lindor, Yafli is like an expression, it means an expression of a neder. It means to explain clearly. That's what Yafli means, right? To set it out clearly. But really, it could have just said, Ki Yindor Neder. Right, he makes a neder. Why does it say ki yafli lindor, which is like be above and beyond? What is going on with that? It's like a preparation. There's some sort of hachona going on here, preparation to make a neder. And again, the idea lahazir Hashem, that also he says seems to be superfluous. Lindor neder nozer lahazir Hashem. Why does that say again lahazir Hashem? And he goes to various other questions he asks as well. Why is it all separated out? There's different things that he's not allowed to do. It should all be grouped together. Al-Sheikh does this. He asks multiple different questions. So he answers and says like this. Omnom, he says, that one of the key aspects he explains of the whole parsha of Nozir is Hashem wishes to teach Klal Yisrael, his holy people, Bal Yoma No Yisrael, that no one should say, Halohu Yisborach Hivdel Shevet Levi. We focused almost all of Sefer Vayikra, and Bamidbar again, we're going through the roles of the Leviim and the Kohanim, and it's all, it seems to be really very much focused on a certain segment of the population. So he says like this, Halohu Yisborach Hivdel Shevet Levi, an ordinary Jew in the pew, who's not a Kohen or a Levi, can say, he separated Shevet Levi, they do the holy stuff. In other words, he looks at the system and he says, it's a hierarchical system. I know where I am. I know my place. I'm a peasant. I know that I'm not the Leviim and the Kohen and the Kohen Gadol. They're the high people. Ki kodesh yemalo, the Kohen Gadol kodesh yemalo. I'm nowhere near him. And if that kedusha was dependent on birth, right, an aspect of birth, and not in the choices we make, the good choices we make, he's like nothing. He's like a zor. He's like a stranger. He's got no relation, nothing to do with him, right? I wasn't born into the right shevet, so I can't come close. He says, Akim bo walakim v'ilmedein. Shem comes in the Parsha of Nasso to teach us that this is incorrect. This is a wrong understanding. Everyone has a choice. Everyone can take steps to separate from these matters of this world, or to sanctify himself until the level of his own good choices. And he will be said, and to him it will be said Kadosh. And Kohen Gadol. And not only that, he's not even just going to reach the Levim or the Kohanim. He'll reach the Kohen Gadol. Okay, Kohen Gadol, he'll be like the Kohen Gadol. What's the similarity in Nasso and Kohen Gadol? Neither of them can become Tomei, even la'oviv v'le'imoi, right? Even the Krovim, right? Says the Kohen Gadol, right? Umin hamikdosh lo yetze. He's not allowed to leave the Kodesh because he's got to continue, right? And here, very similar with the Nasso, he must become Tomei to them. And in that sense, you see that the message is the Nasso can be, anyone can become a Kohen Gadol. In other words, there's a broader message. That's the message of what practically a Nasso can achieve that, but also a message beyond that to counterbalance there that it's all about where you're born into, and it's not with choices you make yourself. It's an amazing alshech. And he goes even further. He says there is an aspect of it where you see that he's even in a way higher than the Kohen Gadol. V'oidlo, he says, more. He gives a reason for the Kohen Gadol. Why can the Kohen Gadol not become Tomei for even his parents and his closest relatives, the Shiva Krovim, the 7 close relatives? Kineza shemen mishchas elokov al rosha. Because the crown of the oil that he's been anointed with is on his head. The emphasis of the Kohen Gadol is, you want to know why you've reached this level? Something undo with you, something external to you. Oil has been put on your head. You've been anointed. You've been placed in that position. What does it say with the Nasso? It doesn't say Shemin Mishchas Elekov. It just says he's come close to Hashem himself. The crown of Hashem is on his head. It's a beautiful diuk. Do you understand? Both psukim are very similar. The Kohen Gadol is not allowed to become Tomei even to his closest relatives. Why? Because the oil is on him. He's been anointed as a Kohen Gadol. Comes along the Nasso, and it says you can't become Tomei either. Why? There's no oil, just the crown.
This seems to imply that the Nasso is great, whereas you can look at it the other way. People should not become.
Right. Okay. So we're going to come on to one aspect of that soon, and the idea that a Nasso is a chote, that potentially considered also to be a sinner. So we have to come back to that as well. But this aspect of the Nasso, that's part of the dichotomy of the Nasso. The paradox of the Nasso is, on the one hand, it seems to be something that's potentially considered negative. On the other hand, it's a positive. I think the most straightforward way of understanding the Nasso is that it may involve, there involves aspects of it which he gives up things which can have a negative ramification or whatever. Yeah. But the point is that the Torah recognizes and values the concept that a person may feel themselves that they need to do this. Yeah. But it's a beautiful alshech because he's saying that what the Nasso does is it balances, and that also, by the way, helps explain why it's here. Because we said, we mentioned about the the Sota being, and why the Sota is right in the middle. We're talking about the Kedusha of the Mishkan and everything else. So the Kedusha of the family, you should know how important that is. He doesn't say this, but actually that helps explain why the Nasso is here as well. Because it's a balance to all of the emphasis on the role of the Levium, which, by the way, is heightened in a way, I would say, in Parshas Bamidbar, even more than Vayikra. Because Bamidbar opens with the counting. It's almost like saying, got the regular counting there. The Levium is a different story, a different way of numbering from a younger age. The whole emphasis is they're elevated. which they are, different roles. But Nazir balances it by saying, yes, they have roles and responsibilities, but you need to know you can be like the Kohen Gadol, right? Like the famous Tana Dvei Eliyahu, right? Whoever wants to take that mantle can take that mantle. And the Rambam at the end of Hilchos Mitzvah Yovel also says that Lo Rak Shevet Levi Bilvad, not only the Shevet Levi, Rambam says anyone who wants to take it has the ability to do so. It's a beautiful ashach. So another aspect on the Nazir is born Rabbeinu Bachai. Now, the way to start this is with the Ramban. So this is the question of the Chatos. So V'zos Toras HaNazir, right? It says in Pasuk Yud Gimel, right? It says V'zos Toras HaNazir b'yom Paragva Pasuk Gimel V'zos Toras HaNazir b'yom Melois Yemei Nizdiroi Yovi Yosel Pesach Ol Moed, right? He has to come to the Pesach Oil Moed, right? It comes to Pesach Oil Moed, and the Kiras Korban Hashem, he brings his Korban to Hashem, the Keves Meshnaso, Oila, Chatos, and Shlomim. That's what he has to bring, right? And Oila, Chatos, and Shlomim. The question which is asked by everyone is why the Nazir has to bring a Chatos. What has he done wrong? So if you look at the Ramban, if you've got the Koras Gedolos, you can see it inside. Second, let's just find it. Very short Ramban. It's on Pasuk Yudalet. The Tam Chatas Sheyakriv HaNozir b'yom Melois Yemei Nizdiroi Lo Nisparish. The why the Chatas, the Nazir has to bring a sin offering is not explained. Val Derech HaPshat, the simple explanation is Ki Ish Hazeh Choytei Nafsho b'Melois HaNazirus. He's sinning when he's completing Nazirus. Ki Hu Atzon Nozir Mikdushosei V'Avodas Hashem. He's in a high level of spirituality. He is separated from his kedusha and his avodas Hashem. And he really should be a nazir forever. And he should remain all his days a nazir and holy to Hashem. As it says, in Amos, your children will be prophets, and your bachurim, your first will be nazirim. Seems like a nazir is like a novi. He's holy to Hashem. He needs a kapara because he's changed his mind. He's coming back to get involved in all the tivus and everything else. So he needs a kapara. What's the problem with the Ramban? There's an obvious question on the Ramban, which Rabbeinu Bachai asks. What's he saying the chatas is for?
He's saying because he became a non-nos.
Yeah. In other words, it's for the future. It's a chatos for the future. Because he's been fine, but he's leaving and he's going back to all the pleasures of this world, and therefore he brings a chatos. Where do you ever find a chatos on a future? The person doesn't bring a chatos because he's going to sin. You understand? You bring a chatos always on the past. You've done something wrong, you bring. Yeah, okay, that's how you'd understand according to Ramban. That's right. Or the fact that it's a vada. He's definitely going to do it, and therefore you might as well he brings a chatas now, exactly, right? It's the point of leaving. Yeah, you can answer it, but Rabbeinu Bachai doesn't. He brings the Ramban and he says, you never find a korban on the future, he says, right? So the Rabbeinu Bachai is a different shot. Aval korban v'chidush einenu mispoya ki moderach hakabala v'skat mizrus hakvar ki ulemala mi'amidus v'tovak ba'etzem arachmu alyonim. He has been at that level, and he's got to the level of, the close as he can get to Hashem, and now he wants to, let it go. Says Rabbeinu Bachai, nire kemisirachik it's like he wants to leave. He doesn't want it anymore. That's why he needs a korban. The loyla kapara, it's not an atonement. It doesn't say in the Torah, chatos lechaper. It says that sometimes with the chatos, korban lechaper. It doesn't say lechaper. It's not for atonement. It's not for forgiveness. It's not slicha. Kavona b'korbonoi, lekarev hakoiches. He says v'yachid lahamshich lem shefem min makar v'stapka midos v'achik yirasel ha'nasav kibetchila. The idea is, he says that that he has to, if you like, make up for the fact, the fact that he's departing from this level of spirituality. And that is something which has to be, if you like, filled. He's just like stuck to hamidos, has to be filled, if you like, the measure of the fact that he's missing something now. And therefore, only afterwards it says, bring the 3 korbanos, and then he can drink wine. That means after he's fulfilled this obligation, only then is he allowed to go back to where he wants to be, in other words, to be the same as everyone else. So, if you like, there's a hole there. That's the point. He's left a void. He's left a void. He's distanced himself from kedusha, and that leaves something missing from him. There's a part missing. He needs to be filled. He needs to be filled in such a way that continues, if you like, his spiritual connection. Otherwise, what it looks like is a conscious departure from spirituality, and that can't be countenanced. And as a result, he has to, I think it does seem to have overtones based on Kabbalah, and in some way, the bringing of these korbanos is some way fills that void. That's what it does. And it's only then that he's allowed to just go back and drink wine. And the idea is that people do fluctuate, and this is reflected in life, sometimes in their spirituality or their connection or whatever. This is how life is. We are human beings. But the message according to Rabbi Birnbaum is that we have to be honest about that. We have to recognize it. We have to recognize that sometimes when we step back from something, it leaves a hole, it leaves a void. And it's not to just suddenly switch gears and say, okay, now I'll have wine again, now I'll go off and party, is a problem. And we need to recognize that. And the final, just very briefly on the Nesiim, just a final idea that's for in the Sefer called, there's a Sefer called Yeshuas Yaakov, and he brings the following pshat. He says, there's a medrash which says, we can just on all the korbanos, it says, the medrash says, on the pasuk parak Zayin pasuk Aleph, Vayibim Klos Mishal Mishkan, etc. Pasuk Beis, Vayakrivu Nesi Yisrael, Roshei Beis Aves. And the medrash says they bring all the Nesiim, bring the korbanos. The medrash says he brings the medrash as Choviv Korban and Nesiim Keshiras Moshe Yisrael. There is a comparison between it's as cherished, the korban of the Nesiim, like the korban of like the Shira Hayom, the Shira of Moshe and Yisrael, because it says Zeh Keli Vanvehu, Ksif Hosam Zeh Keli Vanvehu, and Ksif Hocha Zeh Korban Nachshon Ben Aminodov. Here it says this is the korban of. So the Zeh and the Zeh. So obviously the question is, what is the connection beyond the fact that you have the same words? Zeh Keli Vanvehu, Zeh Korban Nachshon. And he says like this, that there are 2 types of emunah and bitochen. There are 2 types of trust and faith in Hashem. There is someone who can recognize Hashem in the sense of vaya. The people believe. They have a context. There's an emunah in the sense of like the people believed when they were going to leave Mitzrayim. But when a person recognizes Hashem in terms of his action, or how an action that he has done, it's this kind of concept that applies to the entire nation by our main ha'om. The people I generally believe, right? They're all equal, right? Because they didn't yet have that personal achievement of ruchnias, of spirituality on an individual level. There was by our main ha'om, the people in general believed they would be redeemed. But he says what happened at the Yam Suf was they understood and they knew and they recognized Hashem in terms of an actual realization of Hashem's presence, a vision, if you like. And that's what we see. The Shifcha Alayam saw more than Yechezkel ben Buzi. They saw incredible visions of spirituality, of connection, and therefore every individual believed in Hashem according to their own intelligence. They were separated in different types of emunah. That's why it says Zeh Keli Vanvehu, right? And that's why it's Vayaminu in the plural. It says Vayaminu b'Hashem. They plural believed because they were able to achieve individual things on their own level. And that's why it says Zeh Keli. This is my God. On the individual level, everyone reached according to their own individual level, and that's how it is. But in the future, he says, when Mashiach comes, it will say, it says, everyone will be equal in the sense there'll be a constant flow, and everyone will have that same vision and that same realization of the divine presence, and that in the sense that it's equal. to everyone, and that's why it says in Elokeinu Zeh, Kivinu Lo V'Yoshienu, that everyone will be equal in the terms of their level of attaining knowledge of Hashem in that way. So he says that what was going on in the Korbanos of the Nesiim is that they were all equal, okay, in terms of the Korban. The Korban is the same for all of them. But as we know, their machshavas were different. Medrash goes into great length, how each of them had a different intention with the different aspects of the Korbanos that they brought, right? And therefore, that's why it says with each one, Zeh Korban Nachshem, Zeh, because their Korbanos were different, right? They had a different hasoga. They achieved something different in their connection, even though it was equal in fact as to what it was. And therefore, he says that is the connection, and that is the same in terms of the connection to Kriyas Yamsuf, because the same idea applies. Now, what happened to Kriyas Yamsuf was they had an individual and personal connection with Hashem, which varied. Different individuals had different connections. That's what's going also with the Nesiim. When it says Zeh Korban Nachshem Ben Aminodov, Zeh Korban, it means they had a different connection because they had a different individual thought process and mentality and motivation for bringing these korbanos, even though the result was the same. Just like a Kriyas Yamsuf, they're all experiencing the same thing. They're going through the same activity, but they reach a different level. And that's what's happened. That's the connection between the two. And the ultimate aim and ambition is this idea, as he brings this posuk, the idea that water, like water fills the sea, that the knowledge of Hashem, the Osid Lova, in the future will be equal. Like the water is an equal level. Sea level is constantly, you look at the water, all is exactly the same level. Underneath it's different, but it's all the same on top. And that's ultimately the future, how the knowledge of Hashem will be spread equally. So that's a few ideas on the parasha. Thank you for joining. Have a good Shabbos.
Thank you.
Okay, good Shabbos.